My name is Elena Vargas and I have endured 32 years inside a patriarchal family. 3 weeks ago, after my parents passed away, my brother threw me out of the house, looked me in the eyes and told me, "Dad decided this a long time ago. The sons inherit everything, the daughters receive nothing. That is how it has always been in this family and that is how it will continue." Then he changed the locks on the house where I grew up. The house where I spent 2 years caring for our dying mother while he visited her 3 times. The house where I held her hand during chemotherapy while he checked his Rolex and complained about the traffic. He threw my belongings into the garden and told me I was nothing more than a burden. Because in my father's eyes that was all a daughter could ever be. But this is what my brother did not know. Our mother had spent 8 years preparing for this exact moment. 8 years of secret meetings with lawyers. 8 years building something he could never touch. Before I tell you what happened at the reading of the will, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story resonates with you. Now, let me tell you how a daughter with no value ended up with everything. My father, Don Javier Castillo, built his life around an unbreakable belief. Sons carry the family forward. Daughters marry well and disappear under someone else's last name. When Alejandro wanted to enter the real estate business, Dad connected him with every contractor he knew. When I wanted to study nursing, Dad said, "Girls do not need expensive educations. You are going to get married anyway." I earned scholarships. I worked double shifts in a cafeteria. I paid for everything myself. I remember that 8 years ago my mother pulled me aside one night after a dinner where Dad praised Alejandro's first big sale while barely acknowledging my acceptance into the program. "I already took care of you," she whispered, squeezing my hand. "You will not understand it now, but I already did." I had no idea that same afternoon she had been with a lawyer named Gabriela Cole signing documents that would change everything. 2 years ago Mom was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. I moved back that same week. I requested night shifts so I could be with her during chemotherapy. Radiation, the slow decline that cancer brings. My salary dropped by 20%, but I did not care. She was my mother. Alejandro visited her 3 times in 2 years. 3. Each visit lasted less than 1 hour. He would arrive in his Hugo Boss suits, kiss Mom on the forehead, check his Rolex and leave. Dad never acknowledged what I was doing. To him that was simply what daughters did. But Mom noticed. She began meeting someone once a month. "A lawyer," she said, "for insurance paperwork." I drove her to an office, waited outside and then drove her back home. She always seemed lighter afterward, as if she had released something she had carried for far too long. "You are a very good daughter," she told me one night. "Whatever happens, Elena, remember that you did everything right. You were present. That matters more than anyone imagines." I thought she was talking about the cancer. She was not. Let me tell you about my brother and his wife. Alejandro and Isabella lived in a wealthy neighborhood. Isabella looked at me as if I did not even exist. I was background noise. "Have you ever thought about doing something with more professional projection?" she asked me once during dinner. "You cannot spend your life cleaning elderly people's backsides." "I am a registered nurse," I said quietly. "I help people." Her laugh was delicate and dismissive. "Of course you do." The moment that stayed with me happened later that same night. I had gone to the kitchen for water and heard Alejandro and Isabella in the hallway. "Do not worry about her," Alejandro said. "Dad already promised everything to me. She is not going to receive anything. She is only here playing nurse until Mom dies." "Good," Isabella whispered. "We need this, Alejandro. We really need this." I froze behind the kitchen door. Something was wrong. I did not know exactly what, but the desperation in her voice did not match their wealthy lifestyle. I went back to bed and told myself it did not matter. I had no idea how much it would come to matter. If you had heard people you love speaking about you that way, would you have confronted them right there or stayed silent as I did? 6 weeks ago they declared my mother free of cancer. 2 years of fear watching her grow thinner, paler and fight, and she had won. 4 weeks ago my parents drove to my grandmother's house to visit her. They never returned. A truck driver fell asleep at the wheel on the highway. The police said it was instant, that they did not suffer. I was on my shift when I received the call. I remember the smell of Mom's lavender garden when I finally arrived at the house entrance at 3 in the morning and thought she would never tend it again. The funeral was 4 days later. 80 people attended. Alejandro gave the eulogy. He spoke about Dad for 7 minutes. He mentioned Mom's name twice before the reception ended. While I was still receiving condolences from people who remembered my mother much better than my brother seemed to. Alejandro pulled me aside. "We have to talk," he said, about the house. The funeral flowers were still fresh when my brother informed me I no longer had a home. "You have to get your things out before the weekends," Alejandro said with a voice low enough so the other mourners would not hear. "The house is mine now. Dad made that clear years ago." I stared at him. "Alejandro, we have not even read the will yet. The will is just a formality. Sons inherit. You should be grateful I am giving you a week." Grateful. The word came out choked. "Look," he said, softening his voice until it sounded reasonable. "I understand this is difficult, but that was your choice. You could have had a real career. Instead you chose to play nurse. That is not my fault. That is not fair, Alejandro. I cared for Mom for 2 years while I what? While I built something. Do not pretend that cleaning bedpans is the same as running a business. Elena. We both know what you are." He adjusted his shirt cuffs. "1 week, he said, and then I changed the locks." I watched him return to Isabella. I watched them leave without saying goodbye to anyone. He did not even wait a week. 2 days after the funeral I arrived home from work, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with the shift. That is how grief is. My key did not work. They had changed the lock. The deadbolt too. I walked to the garage. My things, my clothes, my books, the box of Mom's recipes. Everything I owned had been packed into cardboard moving boxes stacked against the wall. The rain had soaked 2 of them. My nursing school diploma was warped and wet. Through the window I could see Isabella walking through the living room with a glass of wine, laughing at something on her phone. She saw me watching. She smiled, raised the glass in a small toast and walked away. I called Alejandro. "The house is legally mine," he said without even pretending to apologize. "Dad's estate, Dad's house, Dad's decision. You have 24 hours to get your things off the property." "Alejandro, I grew up there. And now you no longer live there. Maybe if you had made something of your life you would not be standing in the rain right now." I hung up because I did not trust myself to speak without breaking. I sat on the wet grass next to the boxes with my ruined belongings, holding the only thing that had not been damaged, Mom's Timex watch, safely kept in my pocket. That was when I found the letter inside a box of Mom's things that Alejandro had surely assumed was trash. A cream envelope with my name written in her handwriting. "For Elena, when the time comes." I could not open it right there. I called Camila, the head nurse who had been like a mentor to me for 3 years. She arrived in less than 30 minutes. "Get in," she said. "You are staying with me for as long as you need." Later I opened the letter. Her handwriting was shaky, written during chemotherapy when her hands would not stop trembling. "My dear Elena, if you are reading this, then what I feared so much has happened. Your father and your brother have shown you exactly who they are. I want you to know that I saw it. I always saw it, and I could not change your father. God knows I tried, but I could protect you. Contact Gabriella Cole. She has everything you need. All the papers, all the arrangements, everything I could not give you while I was alive. You are not a burden. You never were. You are the best thing I did in my life. I love you more than lavender, more than the sun and more than all the good things. Mom." I read it 3 times before the words made sense. Then I called the number at the bottom. Gabriella Cole was not what I expected. Silver hair, an Armani suit, but a warm gaze. "Elena," she said, "I have been waiting for your call. Your mother spoke about you constantly. We worked together for 8 years. She knew that Alejandro would inherit everything Don Javier controlled and she could not change that. She could not change him, but she could plan around it. Your mother made arrangements that exist completely outside your father's estate. Arrangements that neither Alejandro nor your father ever knew about." "What kind of arrangements?" "The ones you will learn about at the formal reading of the will next week." "Whatever Alejandro says, whatever he threatens, do not react, do not sign anything, just wait." "Why?" Her smile was almost tender. "Because your mother is about to have the last word." 3 days before the reading of the will, Alejandro called. His voice sounded friendly, which somehow was worse than hostility. "I have been thinking about this situation of us fighting. It does not benefit anyone. I prepared a simple agreement. You renounce any claim to the estate and in exchange I give you 10,000 in cash. Enough for you to settle somewhere decent. 10,000 for an entire lifetime of being told I was worth less. For 2 years of caring for our mother while he visited her 3 times. No. Elena, be reasonable. You are not going to win anything in the probate process. Take the money. Start over. I said no, Alejandro. See you at the reading of the will. His voice hardened instantly. You are making a mistake. You are going to leave that room with less than nothing, and you are going to wish you had accepted this offer. Then that is my decision. Fine, but remember I tried to be generous. What happens next is your responsibility. The call ended. The reading of the will was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon on a Thursday. Only 6 of us were there. Alejandro, Isabella, me, Gabriella Cole, her assistant as witness, and, to Alejandro's obvious surprise, my grandmother Carmen. I did not know you were coming, Alejandro said. They asked me to come, she said simply, taking the seat next to me. My daughter asked me to. Gabriella took her place at the head of the table. Today we are going to read 2 wills. The will of Don Javier Castillo and the will of Lucia Castillo. They are separate documents, with separate provisions. 2 wills. Isabella frowned. Everything was joint property. Not everything, it seems. Dad's will was exactly what Alejandro expected. To my son Alejandro Castillo, I leave 70% of my personal assets. Alejandro nodded, satisfaction spreading across his face. To my daughter Elena Vargas I leave 30% of the remainder of my personal assets. So basically nothing, Isabella muttered, doing the math. It is fine, Alejandro interrupted, magnanimous. Now you are going to receive maybe 24,000 after everything is settled. I am the main heir. Actually, Gabriella said, her voice cutting his satisfaction short. Don Javier's will represents only one part of your parents' joint estate. Joint. Your mother's estate is separate and considerably larger than your father's. The room fell completely silent. Mom did not have her own estate, Alejandro said, standing as if height would give him authority. She was a housewife. Everything she had came from Dad. He turned to me with venom in his voice. The house is still Dad's. The real money is still Dad's, and you are still the same as always. I hope you enjoy being homeless, Elena, because I made sure you have nothing to lean on. Mr. Castillo. Gabriella's voice was steel. Sit down. He obeyed. Gabriella opened the second folder. Your mother specifically asked me to read a letter out loud in front of everyone present. For one terrible moment I doubted everything. What if all of this was nothing more than a mother trying to comfort a daughter she knew would be left destitute? Grandmother squeezed my hand under the table. Your mother was the smartest woman I raised. Trust her. I am ready, I said. Gabriella began to read. To my children. If you are listening to this letter, then I am no longer here. I love you both. I want you to know that first, but love does not make me blind. For 35 years I watched your father favor Alejandro in ways that even he did not recognize as favoritism. Sons matter, daughters serve. I could not change him. Believe me, I tried. Alejandro remained completely still. Gabriella continued, and my mother's voice seemed to fill the room. When Elena was born, Javier said, maybe next time we will have a boy. I held my daughter in my arms and silently promised her that she would never be the next time for me. I watched her pay her own way through nursing school while Alejandro received every advantage. I watched her come home to care for me during the worst 2 years of my life. Changing my sheets when I was too sick to move. Holding my hand during chemotherapy. Alejandro visited me 3 times in 2 years. I do not write this to condemn my son, but to explain why I made the decisions I made. The assets I leave to Elena are not a reward. They are not favoritism, they are the balance I could not give her while I was alive. They are what was always owed to her. If Alejandro is listening to this and feels rage, I understand, but I ask him to consider why he feels entitled to everything. Who taught him that? And what did he do to earn it beyond being born male? Alejandro's face had gone pale. Elena, my beloved girl, you were never a burden. You were my heart. Live well, be happy, and never let anyone tell you that you do not deserve everything good. With all my love, forever. Mom. The silence was absolute. I could not speak. Now, Gabriella said quietly. Let us talk about what your mother actually left you. First, the house. The house is part of Dad's estate, Alejandro said. It was always in his name. Actually, number 5 years ago your parents made a deed transfer. The property passed solely into Lucia Castillo's name as liability protection during a lawsuit against your father's business. This transfer was never reversed. The property, currently valued at around $650,000, belongs solely to my mother. Your mother had full authority to leave it to whomever she chose. Gabriella said, looking at me. And she chose you, Elena. No, Alejandro said. This has to be a mistake. Your father believed what he wanted to believe, grandmother said firmly. Lucia told him the transfer was temporary. She never transferred it back and he never checked. Additionally, Gabriella continued, there is the matter of an irrevocable trust. 8 years ago your mother established one with Elena as the sole beneficiary. Funded with a donation of $400,000 from Mrs. Woodford. Invested conservatively for 8 years. Its current value is approximately $1.2 million. Isabella made a sound as if she had been struck. Because the trust was funded entirely with your grandmother's own assets, it never formed part of your parents' joint estate. It always belonged to Elena. My mother, the one who wore a Timex watch and grew her own vegetables, had silently built me a fortune while I thought I was barely surviving. This is fraud, Alejandro stammered. What your father knew or did not know is irrelevant. The trust was established legally with funds that were never his. He had no right to it and neither do you. There is one final asset, Gabriella said. A life insurance policy purchased 12 years ago with Elena as the sole designated beneficiary. But I am her son, Alejandro said, something desperate and broken entering his voice. She cannot simply leave me nothing. It is not true that she left you nothing, Mr. Castillo. You will receive her personal effects, her photo albums, her jewelry and a letter she wrote specifically for you. She leaves millions to Elena and to me a letter. What exactly did you earn, Alejandro? I said. And the words came out low but filled the room. You visited Mom 3 times in 2 years. You told me I was nothing more than a burden while I held her hand during chemotherapy. What exactly did you earn? Let us talk about the total figures, Gabriella said. The property $650,000. The trust $1.2 million. The life insurance $500,000. From your father's estate approximately $24,000. The total is approximately $2.374 million. My mother had left me almost $2.5 million. Alejandro gripped the edge of the table, his face the color of old paper. He tried to stand and then his eyes rolled back and he collapsed, hitting his head against the table as he fell. Isabella screamed. If you had spent your entire life hearing that you were the family disappointment, what do you imagine it would feel like to hear those figures read out loud? He is breathing, Gabriella's assistant reported. Pulse is stable. Probably just fainted. Grandmother squeezed my hand. Your mother would be proud of you. Not for the money. For who you have become despite everything. 20 minutes later Alejandro was back in his chair, pale and unsteady. You knew, he said in a hoarse voice. You knew all of this. I did not know. No, not until a few days ago, and even then I did not know how much. But you suspected. I knew Mom loved me. That is the only thing I knew with certainty. His laugh was bitter. And not me. She did not love me. I think she did love you, I said slowly. I think she loved who you could have been. But she also saw who you chose to become. Alejandro, we should go, Isabella said. Figure out how we are going to pay the mortgage. He looked at me. Elena, you have to help me. We are family. Alejandro, I said, you threw me out of my own house before our mother's flowers had even wilted. You told me I was nothing more than a burden. You tried to make me renounce everything for $10,000. I am not going to pretend that did not happen. I was stressed. That is not really me. Then who are you, Alejandro? Because I have known you for 28 years and I have never seen evidence of anyone different. I am not going to let my brother end up homeless, I said. I am not cruel, but I am also not going to rescue you from the decisions you made while treating me as if I were worth nothing. So what? You walk away with millions and I am left with nothing. You are left exactly with what you earned. The consequences of your decisions the same way I am finally receiving the consequences of mine. Mom loved you, I said walking toward the door, but she loved me enough to protect me from you. That is the difference. Would you have left or would you have found a way to forgive him in that moment? Grandmother followed me into the hallway and placed a small velvet box in my hand. Inside was her sapphire ring. Your mother wanted you to have this. Then she told me something that not even the will had revealed. Lucia wanted to leave your father years ago, before you were born, but then she became pregnant with Alejandro and stayed for you children. The trust, the insurance, everything was her way of giving you the freedom she never had. I hugged her. Behind us I heard Alejandro and Isabella finally leave. I did not turn to look. 1 month later a financial advisor presented me with a plan. Keep the trust invested, pay off my student loans, keep working. The money should not change who you are, she told me. It should only give you options. I kept my job, moved in with Camila and put the house up for rent instead of selling it. 3 months after the reading of the will, grandmother called with news. Alejandro had been forced to sell the house in the wealthy neighborhood. Isabella had filed for divorce. Now he lives in an apartment, grandmother said. I do not think anyone is inviting him to the cocktail parties anymore. The version of myself from 3 months earlier might have felt satisfaction. The one who had already had time to grieve only felt tiredness. I do not wish him any harm, I said. I know. That is the difference between you and him. I went back to the house that weekend. The lavender garden had survived the winter with new green shoots pushing through the soil. She planted this the year you were born, grandmother said. She used to say lavender was for protection. Inside, on Mom's dresser, I found a photo album I had never seen with every important moment of my life captured. There on the first page, her handwriting. For my bravest girl. I held it against my chest and finally cried. This time not from grief but from gratitude. 6 months after the reading of the will, I enrolled in the specialized nursing program I had wanted for years but could never afford. I rented the house to a young nurse and her family. Her daughter asked me if she could take care of the lavender garden. I told her yes. My mother did not give me money. She gave me permission to believe that I deserved it. I have thought a lot about why Alejandro became who he is. Not to justify him, but to understand him. My brother grew up hearing that he was special simply for having been born male. He never developed the muscles for empathy, for earning what he had. That is not born, it is taught, and once it is there it is almost impossible to unlearn. Because admitting you are not special means admitting that your entire identity was a lie. Alejandro is not a monster. He is the product of a system that told him he was worth more than he really was, and when reality finally caught up with him, he did not know how to handle it. I do not know if he will ever change. I hope he does, but his change is not my responsibility. My responsibility is to myself. To live the life Mom wanted for me. To set boundaries that protect my peace. To remember that walking away from toxic people is not cruelty. It is survival. If you are watching this and anyone has ever told you that you are not enough, whether it was your family, your partners, or anyone who should have loved you, I want you to know they were wrong. You were always enough. Sometimes the people who love us protect us in ways we cannot yet see, and sometimes we have to become our own protectors. That is what I learned from my mother. Thank you for listening to today's story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. See you in the next story.